All right. So we just finished episode 6 of The Last of Us, and I've got a lot of thoughts on this one.
Okay.
It was a little bit slower in terms of action, from what we had last week with bloaters, ripping people to shreds.
That's like the pace of the show I'm getting. It's
Yeah.
kind of like you get an episode that's going to be like, we're going there. And the next episode is going to be like, and now we'll calm things down and we'll get to deal with the aftermath. And then yeah.
Because I appreciate what they're doing with this one. You don't want people to get desensitized to... You don't want them to get desensitized to the drama. You don't want them to get desensitized to the action, like the shock value, and a lot of those sad moments. If it happens all the time, you just kind of get numb to it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think most people would agree the show is at its best when you've got Joel and Ellie, and they're just kind of going off of each other. But I think this is going to probably go down as my favorite episode because of a little change that they did in the show. So, in the games, Joel goes to his brother Tommy and he tells him all about, I've seen Ellie breathe in a dozen spores, nothing, right? She's immune. It's not actually quite as clear in the games as to why Tommy, the one who runs and joins the Fireflies at some point, turns Joel down. And they get into a bit of an argument about, like, hey, we survived because of me, yada, yada, yada. At least in the show, Tommy sort of acknowledges, I understand why we did what we did. I don't like it, but I can understand the difficult decisions that we made. In the games, it was just kind of like, Tommy, I'm not really understanding your logic here. You say, well, your brother comes and tells you, I'm just brought you the cure of mankind. And he literally like calls him like pretty much like a spoiled little brother for the most part. Like, what's your deal? Versus with this one, there's a kid involved. I don't think Maria's pregnant in the video games. And so that clearly adds some incentive. Like, that adds more incentive for Tommy in order to stay. Mm-hmm. But they also... The weight of Joel's failure to protect his daughter is so much heavier in the show, where he's having like physical reactions to the idea of losing Ellie. The fear was already there in the games, but in this show, you're seeing it a lot more, where it's like he truly does not want to go through this again, right? At Joel's core, like, he is a protector. And if you have a failure of identity, how do you react to the possibility of going through that again? I mean, we sort of saw it. We saw how Henry reacted to losing Sam. Joel looks at that and says, yeah, that would be me. I do not think I would be able to survive losing Ellie after I lost my daughter. And the show again just sort of, it reminds us how every individual that Joel and Ellie run into further develops what their identities are. It further shows how Ellie does not like to be alone, and it further shows what it looks like being a protector in this world, the good and the bad. And so I've just kind of appreciated the way that they've expanded on that, because we don't get that much mention of Sarah after. But the fact that, he's having nightmares about what went down. And it's already implied in the games that he had nightmares, but him naming it, that's like, he's sort of reliving this thing over and over again. And he's like, yo, I failed her. I don't think I can emotionally deal with this again. Yeah. He's seeing women that, it's like he kind of thought it was his daughter for a second. Like, all that stuff is kind of heartbreaking, And for people that know how this season is going to end, all of that is going to make the finale a lot more like just gut wrenching. So.
Yeah, I thought this episode did a lot for Joel's character, like a lot. I mean, already they done phenomenal work. Pedro Pascal's doing an amazing job. I already loved his character, but I do think this episode in particular, it did a lot. It added a lot of layers and weight. Like his response to seeing Tommy just be fine. I'm not gonna lie, Tommy kind of pissed me off. I was like, you couldn't have just one little call. You couldn't have just the one, just to let him know you're good.
Yeah.
But like his response to not just saying that Tommy was okay, but that Tommy was like moving forward, right?
He didn't need him anymore.
Yeah, didn't need him, and also is gaining the life that Joel lost. Right? Like his response when Tommy told him that he was going to be a father, and Joel was sort of, I mean, you could see he was feeling bitter. That's what that was.
Yeah.
I think it just added a lot of layer to his character and how much he is weighed down and held back by the things that he has lost.
The things that he feels he's failed to. Yeah.
Which I thought was good. I thought it was needed. I also think it's interesting the dynamic that's forming between him and Ellie. Obviously, the dynamic of them just like more being... Obviously, they're much closer. Their relationship is a lot stronger. There's trust there. But I don't know that Ellie really understands or realizes the full impact that her presence in Joel's life has on him. I don't think she understands. Even when she finds out that he had a daughter.
Yeah.
And I think she tries to address it when they're in the room, and she tries to bring it up and be like, I'm not her. Even her just saying that, I'm like, Ellie, shut up. Ellie, be cool.
You're pushing a button that you don't know what happens when you press it.
I don't think she really understands.
No.
She understands, and this is normal. She's a kid. She's a teenager. So obviously, kids understand the world only through their own lens. They're selfish. That's how they operate. It's like that's how they survive.
Sure.
They have to be selfish in order to like function. Okay.
Yeah.
So she's definitely seen this relationship as one where like she needs him. She is dependent on him and she trusts him. And I don't think she understands the impact that has on him.
Yeah.
She doesn't get the weight of that burden on him, and how the fact that he has become so necessary to her is increasingly difficult and more stressful for him. And I actually think that's a dynamic that exists in real life between parents and children all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's very normal, but it's obviously heightened in this world where death is just all around you all the time, and you have a really good reason to not trust anybody else.
Yeah. There's some personal elements to their story, because when you see a family member lose a child, that's a kind of grief that I don't think anything rivals it. Mm-mm. And then when they're given a second chance, that is a kind of love that, like, for me, that like I don't have any kids, that's a kind of love like I don't think I can understand.
Yeah. No.
You know what I mean? It's a very unique sort of love that I think they're exploring in the show, that if you've lost a child and you're sort of given that second chance, I think some of these episodes are hitting a lot harder for you, because they're like, I know that emotional reaction Joel had. I know what that's like, you know, like sitting in the hospital when your partner's in labor, and you're like, I can't go through this again. Like, that's heavy. It's scary.
Yeah. I don't even know if he really had to have lost a child. I think parenthood is innately intertwined with fear. I hear parents talk about it all the time, where like, Brene Brown talks about this all the time.
Yeah.
She talks about like, there's like a very common experience in parenthood where like you go and you like, you know, like you look at your children sleeping at night, right? And you're just like overcome with like how much you really love and care for them. And then she's like, immediately after that, you get hit by like this feeling of fear of like, oh my God, like I love this person so much. Like what would happen if I lost them? And she talks about the importance of unlearning that and trying to, because it kind of robs you of like being in the moment. But I think that is just like a very common experience of like, when you love a person so much, the automatic next feeling after that is fear of what would happen if you lost them. I even think, I mean, people, even if it's not in parenthood, I think parenthood is obviously going to be the most heavy example of that. But I even think about like people in relationships, like when you get into a relationship with somebody and you're like, yo, I really love this person, I really care about them. Your automatic next thought is, shit, like what happens if it doesn't work out, right? Like that's, a lot of people are afraid of commitment because of that very reason.
Yeah.
But I think in this world it's just a little bit different, because you can't, most people in our world, you can sort of function through that and knowing that generally life is safe and generally things are okay. But in this world, they're living under constant trauma.
Yeah.
And trauma, it makes it impossible for you to acknowledge when you are safe, number one. So even if you are in a reality where things are safe, when you've been through significant trauma, you often are not going to feel safe in situations where you are. But in this case, the trauma is constantly being compounded because they're often not safe.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot harder to put that feeling of fear aside. It's like it's constantly intertwined. Like you can't feel the joy and the moments of love and compassion and care without feeling the fear of loss, because loss is always, it's a constant threat. And that's why you're seeing with Joel, like the physical manifestation of it, the panic attacks, because it's like, even watching the show, anytime that they're having a good moment, I'm like, all right, well, when's it gonna, I'm like, okay, well, things are going a little too good right now, so something bad
has to happen
is coming.
That's bad.
So even as a viewer, you're experiencing it, but for them to actually be in it, obviously it'd be even worse. And the same is true for Ellie. She is now attached to this person, and so now she has the constant fear of being unattached from them, being alone, right? So yeah, I think the show is as much about love as it is about fear. I think it's about how those two things are so connected.
What's also interesting is there's also, I'm noticing a theme of, there's a theme of second chances in the show. You saw it, I think, very clearly with Bill and Frank, where we've talked about this before. They get a chance to experience real love, where pre-apocalypse, in the era that they were living in, they probably don't get that opportunity, or at least Bill doesn't allow himself to have that opportunity. And now there's no societal pressure, so they can actually have a chance to be the real person that they want to be. I think some of the other second chances that I'm thinking about very commonly, obviously, is with Joel and Ellie, right? Like that's the second thing that sort of comes up. Joel is obviously getting a second chance to be with his daughter, or Joel is having a second chance to be with a daughter, essentially, right? And it shows the fear that sort of comes with that, and they're doing a phenomenal job at exploring what does it look like to be given that second chance in this apocalyptic world, and how that element really magnifies some of the other emotional elements that come with it. I also thought it was very interesting that there was clearly some social conversation on their second chance at community building, because when Tommy hears Joel use the infamous C word with communism, he's like, whoa, this is not what we are. Wait a minute.
They were definitely Republicans. Tommy and Joel were 100%
I think you could see that. Like, and this isn't us trying to like throw shade at any of them, but they had the American flags hanging on their front porch. Tommy served in the military. They're very blue collar, middle class. They're working the contractor life. All of those elements often can lead to people very easily concluding where they sort of landed on their political aisle. And the fact that he reacted to that word gave a very clear indication of like who they were pre-apocalypse.
Because Joel, I feel like, thought it was funny, his reaction.
Right.
Joel was like, yeah, you guys are communists.
he's like, look at you now, Tommy, you commie. And then he's like, wait a minute, time out. And his wife's like, no, that's kind of what what we're doing here.
Literally, it's a commune.
Now, and you can argue the merits of like, would something like this work on larger scale? That's for a different conversation. But it does show how the show is revealing how this apocalypse keeps giving these people different pockets of new chances, of new opportunities.
I also think this episode answered the question that we've been asking prior, which is like, all these people that are fighting against Fedra, what is the alternative?
That's the alternative.
This is the alternative.
Yes.
And I think that's honestly what I needed, is like, okay, yes, actually, you can't have a very functioning and safe society without having a violent, controlling, government over everything.
And a community and a society that's fair.
Yeah, it's fair, it's flourishing, and everybody has a role. Everybody is on equal footing because they're all dependent on each other.
I think about when Ezra I think about when Ezra Klein. That is such a holy shit, dude. Keep
that in the final cut. Keep it.
Imagine Ezra Klein, which I doubt it'll ever happen. Like randomly comes across this episode and he's like, did this motherfucker just compare me to Ezra Miller? Anyways, Ezra Klein uses this phrase of when the conversation of like, do we abolish the police? Do we defund the police? And he talked about community building to a point where the police are no longer needed. Mm-hmm. And I look at the community that they're living in where Marie says, we rarely even use this prison. That jail, we don't really use that often. And I think it's because they have created a community where
everyone's needs are met.
Yes, everyone's needs are met. And so inequities that normally create environments where crime becomes a product, that isn't happening here. And again, you can sort of discuss the merits of that on a larger scale. But that, again, is just another reminder of, look what this apocalypse gave them a glimpse of that I don't know if everyone in that community would have had the chance of experiencing. A fully thriving community where everyone is sort of seen on a very equal and equitable level. Their needs are met and like they're good.
Yeah.
Everyone's healthy on all levels, mentally, emotionally, physically, and so on and so forth.
It's like what Tommy was saying when he was talking to Joel in the bar, and they were talking about the things that they had to do in order to survive. And like Joel was talking about being judged, and Tommy, he said something. He was like, "I'm not judging you." He was like, he said like we survived the way that we knew how, but there were other ways.
Exactly.
There are other ways to do it. We just didn't know. We just weren't good at them. We didn't have that skill set, so we defaulted to what we knew.
Right.
I honestly feel like the same thing is true of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are other ways. There are other ways to run a society healthfully. We are just not doing them.
Yeah, and I don't think you could make the case, obviously, that a lot of our leaders in office don't know how. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean tangibly. You could see, like, ideologically, they just can't see it in the way that a lot of us are desperate for our society to change in a better way. And, I mean, you could look at what Tommy says where you can sort of see it. Once Tommy has experienced a flourishing society, he can't leave it. Mm-hmm. Why would you want to leave it? And Joel, at least right now, almost feels like a reminder of what Tommy became in a broken society. And I don't think he wants to really revisit that, to think about the dark things that they had to do just for the sake of surviving. Yeah, they've got a real dark relationship that it's sad that it started due to the death of Joel's daughter, and it seems as if like there's that elephant in the room and it sort of manifested itself into a lot of different ways. But Tommy's character is becoming one of my favorites because of what he represents. I mean, you even see it. Look how crazy old Joel looks compared to Tommy. You know what I mean? Like, Joel's been through it, and Tommy's like, yeah, man, we about to go have bacon. You know what I mean? Like, they are in two different societies.
They're in very different places.
Yeah.
very different places in their lives.
And it's not, and this I think is also crucial. The commentary is not saying that there should be no form of leadership in place. It's not just all straightly run by people. There is a democratic elected council. They have leaders, but those leaders are so connected to their community and what the community needs that, like we saw earlier, that's the difference between what it looks like to have people trusting the people that you've elected in your leadership versus when you don't. And yeah.
I also think that this is the reason why this works for them, though, is because everybody understands that their survival is dependent on each other within that society.
Yeah.
Whereas that's true in our society, but people don't recognize it. People don't feel like it is. And so people are not as they're more selfish.
Yeah.
They're less incentivized to think about the needs of the community as a whole over their own. Whereas in this world, you have to think of you cannot survive by yourself. You're dependent on community. You can survive by yourself, but it's exponentially more difficult and dangerous.
But I would say, what are we gauging our metrics for survival as? Just like going from day to day? Because like, look at the people who are doing that. Look what they sort of become. Like, is that surviving? You know what I mean?
It's surviving. You're living.
Yeah, but
you're
not your best self. I guess what I'm saying.
But I think because they recognize that they are forced to recognize that I am only as good as the person next to me, as my neighbor, as the people. I'm only as good as they are. And if any of us are not good, then all of us are at risk. And so they have to move forward in a way that they can make decisions together for the good of the community. I mean, even just, they kind of hinted at it in the way that they got the different things for Ellie and Joel. They trade. They're in a bartering system. They're not even, so there's not even like there's no money. So nobody is, there's no concept of trying to get more than other people, of trying to elevate. That doesn't exist. You are literally operating under a system of, I have what you need and you have what I need, and we work together to meet each other's needs. And it keeps things calm, and it prevents greediness. It prevents all sorts of things.
It prevents inequities.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bound to happen.
They're the only society that has. They're the only one. They're the only society that we met so far that has everything. Even in the QZs, the things that they have there, they don't have. These people have. They have movie theaters. They have bars and restaurants. They have good food.
Electricity. They got showers. They're
the only
toilets.
place that is actually functioning like that. And the way that they're doing it is through essentially socialism.
Is that what we need? We need an apocalypse to occur for people to understand.
You would think, but then we had the pandemic. You would think, right? There was a glimmer of hope in the pandemic where people were like, everything is going to change. Like, as a teacher, we were like, wow, like, this might actually be it. They might actually, like, shake the table a little bit. We might get a little something different. And then we went back to school in person, and they changed not a single thing. Everything was exactly the same. It was so jarring and shocking. Talk to any teacher. Everybody was flabbergasted. Everybody was flabbergasted.
You'd think that an anomaly like that would change your perspective. And I think it did for the people on the ground going through it. But again, people who are sort of making the decisions, I don't think their lives altered as much as it did for us.
No, but I also think, though, that there was a surprising amount of people who were on the ground, who are everyday people, who were like, gotta get back to normal, gotta get back to normal, gotta get back to normal. And I mean, it's kind of baffling to me, honestly.
Change is kind of scary for people.
I guess so.
This might be part of it.
So, I don't know.
I mean, those are our final thoughts. Bella Ramsey did come out with a statement sort of discussing, people who were like hate commenting and review bombing for like LGBTQ plus representation.
I don't understand. The game is about a gay. The game is about a gay girl, right?
Yeah, she is gay. As gay. I mean, they hinted at it very early on in the show when Tess was like, "You got a boyfriend?" and then Ellie was like, "No." Which is like, if you know the game, she's literally trying to tell you like, "Hey, bruh, that's not who I really roll with."
It's so confusing to I'm really confused. I mean, maybe these people complaining are not people who played the game. Maybe it's people who didn't play the game and didn't know. I don't know. But yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, sorry to them. There's more to come. I mean, even next week's episode, I'm like, Storm Reed is going to play her girlfriend, right? There's no way. Or at least my prediction is that it's one of those friendships. I think it's one of those friendships that, like, you know, if you're like when you're like coming of age, you're figuring out your identity, you're figuring out like how you feel about people. I've heard a lot of stories from women who later are like, yes, I'm bisexual, or yes, I'm gay, that are like, yeah, I had like a lot of the friendships that I had with girls when I was like figuring this out, they were like kind of like, you know, like kind of borderline, like kind of like, okay, it's like a little more than a friendship, it's like really intimate, really close, but like, you know, those are the vibes I'm getting. Maybe.
It's interesting because one, I don't think those people realize how much of a vast minority that they're in. I saw people swear up and down that after episode 3, the viewership was going to drop with The Last of Us. Quite the opposite, I might add. The fact that they are, by some metrics, they are doing better than House of the Dragon is a case closed on how out of touch you are with your bigotry. That's my first thing that I was saying. Really it. The second thing is, some of these stories that are being told in this show, especially with episode 3, is some of the best storytelling I've seen in a very long time. You're going to miss out on such great storytelling because you just can't fathom seeing queer couples on the screen. It's going to bug you that much, dude. You're going to miss out on a lot of stories.
I don't care.
Because those stories aren't. That's fine. I'm just, you know, I kind of feel bad for them to a degree because, like, you're going to miss out on so many great stories because you can't get over whatever bigotry and phobia you have, even though you won't even admit it. So it's kind of sad.
Too bad. So sad. Go on Pure Flix.
We're gonna go on. We're gonna enjoy these shows. Go watch, you know,
Pure Flix. Go watch Pure Flix.
What's the
Christian Netflix?
Oh, there's that. But like Daily Wire is coming up with like movies and stuff. Like Ben Shapiro and Gina Carano. They've got their own stuff. Go watch that.
Honestly, I want to watch that. I want to see what type of movies does Ben Shapiro make. There's no way that man has an artistic bone in his body. He is not going to make anything good.
You know what's so crazy about this guy? His critique was like, I had no problem on episode 3. I have no problem that.
I remember it. He was like, "Oh, the problem was that there was no zombies in a zombie show."
Not only are you showing, there was no
zombies in episode 1.
There was no zombies. Not only are you showing, you don't understand how the genre of zombie and apocalypse work because that's not that uncommon.
No, they didn't have to do that.
You are flat out wrong. Ellie killed a clicker with the knife.
Yeah.
Bill watched on his camera a clicker explode from one of his traps. We saw zombies in the episode. So you are either an idiot or you're lying.
But I'm just like, there was no zombies in episode 1 from what I remember.
No, I mean, the outbreak, you saw that. You didn't see clickers, but they were infected.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay. But there was also no zombies in this episode. Were there? No.
No, you're right.
There's episodes.
But he won't have that complaint though. He won't have no complaints about that. Exactly. And this is what I be talking about, where people are going to bring up the most random excuses that they would not bring up if everything was normal to them in an episode. If there were no minority people, if there were no people of color, if there were no queer people, all of those little details that you think are the real reasons why you didn't like an episode, you wouldn't be bringing those up. You're telling on yourself.
I really appreciate that this show is like, yes, black people are in the post-apocalyptic world.
Tommy's wife was not black in the game, so I appreciate that. Yeah, she's white.
No,
I mean, like Joel and Tommy, they're white also. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I think it's funny how the show was like not really. It's like honestly, like okay, frankly, Pedro Pascal in this show. If I didn't know that his name was Pedro Pascal in this show, if you told me that that was like a white man, I might be like, okay.
I don't know. I look at his brother though.
No, his brother definitely.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is like they are like not really addressing the fact that they were just like, yeah, we're just gonna change the race of the actors, but nothing else. Like nothing else about these characters is pointing to them. I'm like, my assumption is that these are Mexican people because they lived
Sure.
in Texas. That's my assumption.
But I mean, there's a lot of Mexicans that are just like them though.
No, I know there
Yeah.
are, but like it's just funny that they're not even like in the show. In tonight's episode, I think Tommy said adios.
Yeah.
But not even like a good adios, you know?
Oh,
And it was
come
like,
on.
it was like an American adios. Like, I'm like, this is hilarious to me that they're like, yeah, we're just going to do this and we're not going to address it, talk about it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Anyways, those are our final thoughts. Thank you all so much for tuning in and let us know what you think about episode 6. So we'll see you next time. Peace.